If you're watching this video, and I assume that you are, I assume you're also one of the very few people who has heard me play my newest song called Survivor's Guilt. I wrote it just a few days ago. I practiced it a few times and then decided to go ahead and record it. Sometimes when I write a song, I need to just go ahead and get it out there as soon as possible, because when I'm writing a song, it's something that I have to work my way through before I can write another song. I very rarely have two songs at once that I'm working on for that very reason. I feel that in some way I have to graduate from one level to get to the next. It's so easy for me to write songs. I can write so many so easily, but to practice a song enough to the point where I can record it in one take is my version of therapy to work my way through this song. So here's this one, the lyrics to Survivor's Guilt. And this is one of those songs where it's just got two verses. It doesn't really have a chorus. I like to write songs like that every once in a while. Just that little bit of cerebral concept. I wrote a song called My Jill, My Treasure Still. And that was actually just one verse. But I used some diversity in there to kind of throw off the concept that there's actually no chorus. So here we go, Survivor's Guilt. I've got to say this out loud so I can sort this thing out. What if I'd been born on the other side? I'd be damned across those enemy lines. That's the first verse. And then the second verse, to be saved, yet to live with survivor's guilt, to live in a house that others built. It could have been me who never seemed to have a chance. Is that a blessing? Is it a curse? Or even worse? End quote. That's the entire lyrics to the song, just those two verses. And then of course there's a lot of falsetto stuff that I do to add ambiance to the cerebral concept of this song as far as what's being dealt with here. So I recognize hardly anyone hears these songs that I write. Most people never will ever hear of me. They'll never hear my songs. I mean, we're talking like 100 people will ever hear most songs that I do, and I know that. But it's interesting because if you just listen to the song, you might be familiar with the concept of survivor's guilt, which means that you were in a physical situation where others died around you and you were the one to survive, and you think, why me? Why didn't I die too? Or why didn't they get to survive along with me? Why am I the only one surviving here? That's survivor's guilt. So yes, anyone who's going through survivor's guilt, I feel that every single one of these words could translate and be the same for that physical situation. But for me, I'm using that as basically the first entry as far as the concept is. But really, for me, what this is a song about Christianity. It is someone who is sorting his way through his doubts and his faith. That's me in real time. And I've actually got another song that I'm working on, which is going to basically say, is it heresy or is it just honesty? To have questions about your Christian faith automatically seems like heresy, I think, a lot of times if you try to say that out loud. And so for me, I feel like my only outlet where I can really talk about this is through these songs that, again, 123 people will ever even hear. But to think about this through a Christian perspective, here's what I'm struggling with, and I've struggled with for a long time, as far as the concept of survivors go. And I struggled with this even as a kid. I remember talking to my dad about it. He would read the Bible to me before I go to bed, and he'd pray with me, even as a young kid. And I said, but what about all the people who never hear about Jesus? What about the people of other religions that are doing what they think is right, what they believe is the real God, and they're not hurting people, they're actually helping people, but just they were born into the wrong country and in the wrong religion, and they never hear about Christianity. What about them? And even now, as a 40-year-old man, I have still yet to hear an answer that I want to. I mean, someone recently said to me, well, think about it this way. God knows up front who's going to believe in him and know the truth and live in the truth. So he allows people to be born in a place that they'll have access to hearing it. But again, it reinforces this concept of survivor's guilt. Because I think a lot of people, they deal with their own pride, like, oh, but I'm a good person. And for me, I don't struggle with that. I don't think that I'm a good person. I don't feel that I deserve to be saved any more than anyone else. And maybe this sheds a little bit of light on Bullet with Butterfly Wings for Smashing Pumpkins at the very end, where he says, and I still believe I cannot be saved, after he's saying that Jesus is the only son for you. Like, I do believe Jesus is the way, the truth, and life. I do believe that, but it's an honest struggle that I have, that I know people who are of different religions, and perhaps on some levels they're better than me morally, and it feels like a technicality that I go to heaven, I have eternal life in paradise, and others don't. In fact, they're eternally punished for ultimately not choosing the right God. And specifically, the way I look at it as an American, my odds were already in my favor being born in the United States, and being born in the South specifically, the odds were in my favor. So I struggle with that. And that's what this song is about. So maybe I'll go through the lyrics one more time. And now that you know it's from a Christian perspective, and knowing that the survivor's guilt is actually me thinking, why me? How did I get to be favored by God to know him as the way, the truth, and the life? And had I not been, I'd be cast to hell for eternal punishment. Like, I struggle with that. That doesn't seem fair to me in my human concept. And I don't know that I'll ever get closure with that. And I think the only answer we can get is that all of this is to glorify God. But ultimately, as a father thinking of my children, I would never want to see them harmed. And to even put them in a situation where they could choose the wrong thing that could cause such punishment, I struggle with that. Here's the lyrics one more time to Survivor's Guilt. I've got to say this out loud so I can sort this thing out. What if I'd been born on the other side? So specifically, we can even look at this, I've mentioned many times, Vietnam. What if I had been born in North Vietnam and I had to defend my own life and or country, and I had to attack the Americans or the South Vietnamese, and I died? So I go to hell. I never believed in Jesus. I never really heard about Jesus. I just know that these Christians, if anything, are attacking us, and we've got to. So what if I'd been born on the other side? Whatever the other side is, it means the side where I wasn't born in a country where I would know about Jesus and have loving parents. What if I'd been born on the other side? I'd be damned across those enemy lines. And when I say damned, I mean it literally. People use that as a curse word more than anything, but damned means to be cursed forever, for eternity, by God specifically. So I would be damned across those enemy lines had God not had favor on me. There's the survivor's guilt right there. And then the other verse, to be saved, and I mean that in a spiritual way specifically, yet live with survivor's guilt. Again, that's what I'm going through. To live in a house that others built. That more specifically is to be more of a metaphor of I was born into framework, a sense of shelter that others set up for me before I even got here, and all I had to do was be born and believe, which the chances of me believing were much more higher by being born into that home compared to me being born in North Vietnam with a rifle in my hand, basically, as Bruce Springsteen mentioned. It could have been me who never seemed to have a chance. Is it a blessing? Is it a curse? Or even worse? And what I mean by that is it's a blessing to be born having such access to knowing about Jesus. But is it a curse in knowing that I have this sense of survivor's guilt, and knowing that I can do my best to love others as myself and to glorify God the best I can, especially by building relationships, but there's just so many people that I can't do anything for physically. I can pray for the whole world, but ultimately there's a little bit of this world that I actually have access to. And so it almost seems like, what does that, because I now have more responsibility, is that even worse than a curse? Because here I am, saved with survivor's guilt, knowing that it could have been me that wasn't so fortunate. For me, this is my version of survivor's guilt in the Christian concept. And I'm sure if you're not a Christian, this sounds like some crazy stuff. And maybe most Christians don't really think about this, but I think about it all the time. It sort of consumes me. And it's in several of the songs that I've written. For example, I Still Believe is one of those songs where I talk about how my faith has never been this strong, yet neither has my doubt. I've got another song that I recently wrote on here called Why. And it also sorts out this concept. And so does even a song called The Sixth Commandment. All of these songs that basically, I was born into a fortunate situation where I could not only be spiritually saved, but because I do follow God's teaching, even the way my life is set up, I continue to find favor by following these Christian principles. So there you go. I'm sorting this out all the time. And so many of my songs are about this sort of thing. Thanks for watching this 10.5-minute video. Your comments belong right here.